Russian Navy is collapsing in front of our eyes, and there is one reason behind that: Ukraine. You see, a Russian Kilo-class submarine, the Novorisk, has reportedly suffered a serious malfunction while operating near the Strait of Gibraltar. That's nowhere close to Ukraine. According to multiple reports, it developed a fuel leak inside the hull. A terrifying problem for any nuclear submarine, because the leak fueled in a confined space can trigger an explosion. Now, as you can expect, Putin has not publicly admitted to the problem. But then again, Putin is not in a habit of talking about submarines. Just look at this clip from 2001 when the Kursk submarine incident happened. This is how Putin deals with a grieving mother, just by drugging her.
In Russia, families of sailors drowned in a submarine accident lash out at government officials. This mother's pain at the loss of her young son is almost unbearable to watch. But what happens next is equally unnerving. Without warning, the woman keels over into the arms of Navy officials. But rewind the tape and you can see what really made her collapse. The answer is right here. The woman behind her holds a needle full of knockout serum, and she jabs it into the back of the outraged mother. This shocking videotape was not shown on Russian TV. But later, Russian officials fessed up. They say they drugged the woman only because her husband asked them to calm her down for her own good.
Now we'll talk about the Kursk ghost in just a second. But the fact that the Russian nuclear submarine surfaced in the Strait of Gibraltar and on top of it, it was spotted under distress tells us everything we need to know. On its own, this surfacing may look like a freak accident. Submarines are of course complex. Sometimes things just break. But when you zoom out, this is no isolated failure. It's part of a much larger picture, one where Ukraine has systematically dismantled Russia's naval logistics, overloading Russia's repair yards, breaking its supply chains, and forcing ships back to the sea before they are truly ready. This nuclear submarine wasn't sunk by a missile or drone. It was sunk by pressure. The pressure that Ukraine has applied every single day since the Russian invasion began. To understand why this submarine story is so striking inside Russia, we have to go back to the year 2000, when the Russian submarine, the Kursk, sank in the Barents Sea. That disaster killed all 118 sailors on board. The Kursk symbolized more than a tragedy. It revealed the weakness of Russian Navy, outdated technology, poor maintenance, and a system that cut corners until it collapsed. Fast forward 25 years, and here we are again. Another Russian submarine in crisis, this time in the Mediterranean. The details are different, but the pattern is the same. Not enough resources, not enough expertise, and a navy stretched too thin. As if this wasn't bad enough, Putin has made the situation worse by invading Ukraine. Now, we already know Ukraine's campaign against Russia's Black Sea Fleet has been brutal and relentless. From the very first use of naval drones in Sevastopol harbor to Storm Shadow and Scalp missiles smashing the docks, Ukraine has been hammering the fleet non-stop. The craziest part is, this is something General Ben Hodges mentioned on our podcast almost a year ago. Let's listen to that clip.
Yeah, well, I mean, how do you define greatness? I mean, what is great? Yes, they have thousands of nuclear weapons, without a doubt, and they have endless amounts of natural resources, but yet they are the second best army in Ukraine. I mean, they have not been able to defeat Ukraine. Their navy has been defeated by the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians don't even have a navy in the traditional sense. Their Air Force, the great Russian Air Force, with huge advantages, failed its two main tasks. They have failed to achieve air superiority, and as a result, they also have failed to interdict the lines of communication, the supply routes over which weapons and ammunition from the West moved from Poland into Ukraine. Not one train or convoy has been destroyed. So this legacy of corruption inside of Russia and absolute concentration of wealth in a few hands and the oppression that's there is what keeps Russia from really being the great country that it could.
Let's talk about those attacks on Russian Navy in a bit more detail. That's because every attack leaves ships limping back for repairs. But here's the problem. Russia doesn't have the capacity to fix them all. Sevastopol's docks are under constant threat. Novorossiysk is safer, but has far fewer facilities. So what does this all mean? Repair overload. Instead of months of careful maintenance, ships and submarines are patched up and shoved back to the sea. Crews sail vessels that aren't seaworthy because Moscow needs them visible to show strength. That's how you get a submarine like the Novorossiysk leaking fuel inside its hull. It isn't bad luck. It's the logical outcome of a system pushed past its breaking point. But you see, Putin's problems don't just stop there. Let's just assume for a second that Russia had unlimited dock space. It would still face another problems: spare parts. Submarines rely on incredibly specialized equipment, everything from high-pressure pumps to precision fuel systems. Before the war, Russia imported much of this technology. Sanctions have slammed that door shut. At the same time, Ukraine has targeted the infrastructure that moves spare parts around the country. That includes bridges, railways, and depots. The Kerch Bridge, attacked multiple times already as we have covered on this channel, is the prime example of this. But Ukraine has also had trains, warehouses that carry military supplies. That means even if Moscow can build or smuggle the parts it needs, getting them to the fleet is a logistical nightmare. The result? Russia resorts to cannibalizing parts from other ships, using outdated or lower quality substitutes, and improvising repairs. For a warship, that's a very bad news. And for a submarine where precision and safety are everything, it's a disaster waiting to happen. And now we're seeing it happen in front of our eyes. But there's another force driving this breakdown: politics. You see, Russia's Black Sea Fleet was once the jewel of its navy. It dominated the region, projecting power over Ukraine, Georgia, and even NATO's southern flank. But Ukraine's strikes have turned it into a shadow of itself. Dozens of ships have sunk or disabled. Sevastopol is no longer safe. For Putin, that's humiliation. He needs submarines and warships out at the sea to prove Russia is still the second strongest military in the world. He needs the image of strength, even if the reality is weakness. That pressure flows downhill. Admirals order ships back into service too soon. Repair yards rush work, and crews are told to make do with what they have. The nuclear sub incident is the product of that political desperation. It's a sub that likely needed more time in dry dock, but was pushed back into active duty because Kremlin cares more about optics than readiness. This reminds me of the famous saying, "Don't interrupt your enemy if he's making a mistake." From NATO's perspective, this is a huge victory. Western navies know how dangerous submarines are, especially diesel-electric boats like the Novorossiysk, which can operate quietly in shallow waters. A functional Black Sea Fleet submarine in the Mediterranean poses a great threat to shipping, to NATO patrols, and to undersea cables. But a submarine that can't keep its own fuel contained? That's no threat at all. In fact, it's a liability. Every hour the Russian Navy spends fixing its self-inflicted malfunctions is an hour it is not projecting power. And on top of all this, NATO doesn't need to sink the submarine. Ukraine has already done it indirectly. Now, pressure comes from multiple fronts. In fact, more fronts you have, more the pressure Russia feels. This is where Ukraine has added yet another layer of pressure to Putin and the Russian Navy. That's isolation. By forcing Russia to abandon Sevastopol, Ukraine cut the fleet off from its best facilities. The nuclear sub is further away and less capable. Ships scattered to secondary ports lose the support they once had concentrated in Crimea. This stretches Russia's naval infrastructure thin. Every spare part travels farther, every repair takes longer. For a submarine which requires constant, specialized upkeep, that's crippling. When the nuclear sub ran into trouble near Gibraltar, there was no nearby safe harbor with expertise to fix it. What could have been a manageable issue escalated into a full-blown crisis. Now the submarine needs to be towed back to either Kaliningrad or maybe to a Russian mainland port. And that's going to take a lot of time, and that's going to create many headlines that Putin is not a fan of. After the Kirk incident, Putin promised himself he will never associate himself with failure. That's exactly why after the Kursk incident, Putin decided to never go anywhere where public can see him next to Russian authorities' failures. He realizes that it's important to project strength if he wants to continue to rule Russia. It's not a democracy, but even then, legitimacy is very important if he wants to stay at the top, and that legitimacy comes from the Russian people. And now, slowly but surely, Ukraine is chipping away at that legitimacy. Step back and look at the big picture. Ukraine did not fire a missile at the submarine. It didn't send a drone after the submarine. Instead, Ukraine just amplified the Russian failures. Ukraine destroyed the system that keeps Russian submarine operational. They overloaded the repair yards, broke down Russia's supply chain, and they put political pressure on Putin to rush redeployment. This means Putin is creating his own downfall, all thanks to Ukraine. Now, Putin realizes all this. In fact, he's spending all his days thinking about why Russia is failing so badly. And just recently, he spent a whole day talking with the Belarusian dictator about how much money Russia is losing. Well, unfortunately for Putin, Lukashenko cannot keep his mouth shut. And as soon as that meeting was over, Lukashenko tells the media in Belarus that they just spent the whole day trying to figure out how to survive during these difficult times. Listen to it yourself.
Yesterday, we sat with Putin almost all day and thought about how we could survive during this difficult time. Russia is a huge, rich empire. It has immeasurable wealth, but today, we are thinking about how to survive together. It would seem that there is nothing to think about because everything is under our feet. But it's nothing like that. They are redividing the world. They're tearing it into pieces. This is yours and that is ours. And they are starting to strangle us. They won't leave us alone, and I have to persuade you to work. Well, is it really necessary for our generation to experience war again?
YouTube just dropped a mind-boggling announcement. It is paying creators $64 million per day. Why? Well, because YouTube doesn't have enough creators. That is why you see videos on your homepage that have less than 1,000 views, like this one right here. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that everyone should start a channel. But if you have ever wondered about starting a YouTube channel or a faceless channel, now is a perfect time. YouTube is paying creators millions of dollars every single day, and it's pushing newer and smaller channels now more than ever. But I'm sure you have many questions on how to start and grow a channel. We get questions in our email all the time from some of you guys. That's why we decided to put all our YouTube advice into one YouTube video for completely free. So if you're someone interested in starting your own channel, you can watch that video here on YouTube by clicking the link in the description or card on your screen.